Hello my lovely friends, it's Margaret, and it is time for my November wrap-up. As usual, I am running out of memory at the end of the month, so we're just gonna fly through these. I'm not gonna go into stats because they really weren't all that interesting this month. I read 7 young adult books, 1 adult book, and read a lot of 4-star books and some 5-star books, and we will get there, okay? Okay. I don't care about the stats this month, I just care about the books, so I'm gonna start out with the audiobooks that I read this month. 3 of these I'm gonna talk about together because they are all part of the same series, and so I'm just gonna tell you what my ratings are. I read Truthwitch, Windwitch, and Sightwitch by Susan Dennard. I gave Truthwitch and Windwitch 5 stars, and I gave Sightwitch 4 stars. This series, guys, this series just basically grabbed me by the throat, and it has not let me go, and I can't, okay, so this is about, I don't have coherent thoughts about this series because I just am in a not happy place with this series because I'm halfway through book 3, and I'm not okay. Let's just talk about Truthwitch. This is the first book in the Witchlands series by Susan Dennard. It is about Safi and Isolde, and they're both basically disasters at the beginning of the book, and then they meet Merrick, who is a disaster, and they're also being hunted by Edwin, who doesn't think he is a disaster, but he is a disaster. So you can tell, this is like right up my alley. Basically, Safi's uncle has hired Merrick to take Safi and Isolde away from their homeland because the Emperor wants to marry Safi, but she's a Truthwitch, and that's bad, and there aren't a lot of Truthwitches, so in fact, I think Safi is the only one. She is in fact the only one, and so basically everyone wants a Truthwitch so they can use the Truthwitch, but her uncle is trying to put into mind her uncle has some plan with her and Isolde, and we don't know all of it yet, even now in the 3rd book, because he doesn't communicate his plan very well. He's just like, go, do this, do that, and Safi is having none of it because she's like, I need reasons, and so that's basically the 1st book. It is, I love it. This is probably my favorite book in the series so far, unless the thing that I've been waiting for happens in Bloodwitch. If that happens in Bloodwitch, that will be my favorite book in the series. If it does not happen in Bloodwitch, whichever book it happens in will be my favorite book in the series, and then probably the last book. I don't know, it depends. Susan Dennard is stressing me out, on 2 fronts, because she's stressing me out with Bloodwitch, she's stressing me out with her Twitter choose your own adventure thing, she controls my life at this. Okay, so I really liked this series. I liked the fact that we have 2 really badass women at the forefront of this series. I like the things that it is critiquing and it's talking about in, I think a lot of the things that you see in this series are things that fantasy does not always get right when it is dealing with women. This series has so many women who are allowed to be really good at what they do and very strong. And they're not all like Safi, who is very much a kick-ass and take names type of feminine protagonist. She's very much, she and Isolde are basically kind of like this battle couple type thing that's going on. They are the bro TP to end all bro TPs. They are so good. I love them, and I need them to be back together. I need all of the characters to be back together at this point, and they are not, and it's frustrating me. This one has a little bit of a romance that I was very much into, and I need more of it, and Susan Dennard is withholding. It's making me very sad. I'm fine, it's okay. And I also really like the magic system because it's more of an elemental magic system, and it's one that is very much like she uses magic to answer certain things that we have in technology. There are a lot of different kinds of witcheries, and you have Safi, who's a Truthwitch, you have wind witches and fire witches and tide witches and all of that, and they all have a place in the society that they're in. The only thing that I don't like about this series is a spoiler about something that happens at the end that has not been resolved or fixed since it has happened. And so I need, please, I need it to be fixed. Sightwitch is actually a novella. It is about Ryber, and it takes place before Truthwitch happens. However, it will spoil things for things that happen in Truthwitch and Windwitch, I feel. So don't read it until you've read Truthwitch and Windwitch, but definitely you want to read it before you read Bloodwitch. I didn't enjoy it quite as much because it wasn't the world that I really wanted. I liked getting to know Ryber as a character. I liked getting to see her and Cullen working together, and it really sold me a little bit more on the relationship more than the 1st book did. But at the same time, some of this I felt like should just have been in the main series. That said, I really enjoyed it. I thought it was interesting. I'm mad about the twist that we find out in Bloodwitch. There's a twist involving 2 of the characters that are in this novel, and I'm just like, why would you do that to me? Susan. Why? Why, Susan? Anyways, really good series. I need the rest of the books, but they're not out yet, so I'm just going to suffer, I guess. The next book I finished was LaRose by Louise Erdrich. So this is about two families. The father in one family accidentally shoots and kills the son of the other family. So Landro and his wife decide that they are going to take their son and give it to this other family, not necessarily as a replacement, but kind of as a retribution. And so LaRose, which is the boy's name, ends up being in this joint custody situation where he's spending time with one family and then with the other one. The families used to be very close. Obviously, the fact that this child was accidentally shot changes things between the families, but it's a lot about healing and them coming to a place where they are whole again after this horrible death. It also deals a lot with what life is like for people on reservation. It deals a lot with the generational trauma that Native Americans face because of the fact that we have forced them out of their lands and forced them onto reservations and continually taken away their rights. I really like the fact that this was a very educational book. I like the fact that Louise Erdrich really gets into her characters. There was no one in this book that was portrayed as a true bad guy or good guy. They are flawed, they are human, they are real, but she presents everyone's perspective as though you are in that person's head almost. It's third person, but it's like you know what they're thinking and you know how they're feeling, and it's not like this is a right or a wrong way to think. It's just presented to you as evidence of what has happened in the past. I really like it. It has kind of a dual storyline because it talks about the boy, LaRose, and then it talks about the first LaRose in this boy's family. So it's a dual narrative with this kid and then a young woman who was taken from her parents when she was very young. There is a lot about residential schools in here, a lot of which I already actually, this isn't the first book I've read about residential schools, but it's a hard book to read, and it is not one that you probably want to read if you have small children. It would probably not be easy to read in that case, but it was still very good. I ended up giving it 4 stars. There were a few things in the plot that, like, they're just storylines that I'm tired of, and I understand that they are realistic, but I could just do without them. And it had nothing to do with, like, any of the representation here. It was just choices that were made by characters that I was just like, I'm really tired of this. I had the same problem with Everything You Never Told Me by Celeste Ng. I was just like, I'm tired of this trope being the way people react to tragedy. I'm tired of it. We already had enough people making bad decisions because of tragedy in this book. That one thing we just didn't need. We didn't. The final audiobook that I listened to in November was The Diviners by Libba Bray. I am doing the Diviners read-along along with Monica Kim and Emma from Emma Books. And so I started this. I've been meaning to read it for a very long time. It's on my list of books I need to read in 2019, so yay, I get to check that off. This is about... I can't remember her name all of a sudden. This is about Evie O'Neill, and she gets into some trouble in her small town of Ohio, and because it is a small town, her parents decide that the best way to deal with this is to just ship her off to New York for a time. Now, what her parents don't know is that the thing that she got in trouble for, she was telling the truth. She is what is known as a diviner, and her particular power is that she can hold objects in her hand and know things about the person who owns that object. She ends up letting spill some secrets about somebody that he did not want getting out, and so his family makes a big fuss about the accusations that she makes because she doesn't have any real proof, but she knows that he did it. So while she is there with her uncle, a string of murders start happening, and because she is a very modern woman living in the 20s, she decides that she is not going to stay behind while her uncle and his assistant investigate these murders. So she goes, and she ends up touching something that belonged to the victim, and she sees things. And so basically, she starts to help her uncle solve this kind of occult killing case. I've been told it is a very creepy book. I was not particularly creeped out by it. There are a lot of moving parts in this series. I enjoyed that fact, but it did mean that it took me a little bit more time to get into this book than it necessarily would have. There also is not a very clear romance at the beginning. It gets a little clearer towards the end. However, I'm not entirely sold that that is what the final result is going to be. I don't know. There's a lot I don't know yet, and I'm going to be reading the next book soon, so hopefully I'll be able to make my mind up about some of these things. However, I liked it enough to give it 4 stars. I will be continuing on with the series. There wasn't a lot, like, even the fact that it took me a while to get into this book, it's still... I wasn't bored. I don't think that that was a bad thing. I think that's something that's going to be one of those things that when I go back and reread this series, because I like to do that if I end up liking the series, I think there will be a lot of pieces that are like, oh, that's what that meant. It was really fun after I got to about the halfway point to start going, so this is why that was in, why we had that at the beginning. The only real thing that I had to say that really docked it a star was the fact that, like, the ending took forever. Like, we had the climax, we had the resolution of that, and then we had a whole bunch of stuff afterwards, and I was just like, could we not have worked some of this into the beginning of the next book? Because it just felt like the ending dragged. continue. Like, there were a couple of places where it would have been really good to stop the book, and then it just kept going. And you get to another place, it was like, okay, this is a good place to stop, and then it kept going. And I was just like, I'm sure this is information that we need, but why? Just why? So, going from there, we're going to talk about the physical books that I read in November. The first book I finished was The Boy in the Black Suit by Jason Reynolds. The main character of this, Matt, his mother has just recently died of cancer. He's been off of school for a few weeks, and that means that he actually missed out on his school's kind of work. There's like some sort of work program that his school does, and so he is in the market for a job, and he ends up getting a job at the funeral home of the man who lives across the street from him. Through this, he starts going to funerals because he's finding a kinship with the people who are grieving. He goes to these funerals trying to find the person who is going to be the most like him, the one that basically falls apart during the funeral. It's really an interesting exploration of grief and how that affects us. It also has a little bit of a cute romance, which I liked. It takes a while to get there, but it's there. Jason Reynolds does such a good job with characters and with voice. I really appreciate that in The Long Way Down, and then this just took it up another notch. Now, the only thing that some people might have an issue with the fact that there's only like maybe 2 female characters in this book. In fact, I think there's only one named female character that we really spend a lot of time with. The other one that we really see a lot of, although she's not actually in the novel because she's dead, is Matt's mom, and she is still very much an influence in his life, even though she's not there. However, this is one of those books where you read it and you go, not every book needs to necessarily pass the Bechdel test, if that makes sense. I ended up giving this 5 out of 5 stars. It was so good. It was heart-wrenching. It is a sad book, but it is also a happy book, and I really enjoyed it. This is one of the books that was on my secret TBR. Alright, give me a minute because the sun is setting, so we need to fix this lighting situation. There we go. It's different, but at least you can see my face now. The next book I finished in November was Brightly Burning by Alexa Duh. This book was the group book for round 2 of Vaultathon. It is Jane Eyre in space. Do you need to know much more? No, not really. I really like this book. I gave it 4 out of 5 stars. Does it have its faults? Yes. I don't think certain elements of Jane Eyre really translate to a sci-fi. Not necessarily like the plot and stuff, but certain attitudes just don't translate to a future setting. There were places where things were said and things were done that I think would not have been acceptable should not be acceptable in the future. There were places where I really wished certain people would have spoken up and said something, so it's not a perfect book. The romance is a little messy, but that's because it is Jane Eyre, and the romance is hecka messy in Jane Eyre. However, I really liked how Alexa Dunn just took the Jane Eyre plot and she translated it to a space opera. I liked how she updated things. I liked the twists that she put on some of the stuff. No, it is not as much a social commentary as Jane Eyre is, but I think that's because it's a YA space opera, so it is there completely meant to entertain and kind of make you think about how awful it will be if our planet dies. I highly recommend it. I thought it was very good. I think it's real, it's messy, and it is a fun read. And also, there were a couple of things in Jane Eyre that are kind of squicky and make me not like Rochester all that much, and I liked the way she handled those plot elements. I thought she did a very good job of handling them in this book. Okay, so the final book that we have to talk about is The Queen of Nothing by Holly Black. Technically, I finished this before I finished Brightly Burning, but it was on my shelf, so I forgot to talk about it. But now we're talking about it. If you want my full review on this book, I have a spoiler-free review, which I will link in the card. And I also have a spoilery, happy rant, if you want to see me just geek out about everything that happens in this book. Not everything, but all the stuff that I liked. I will have that linked in the description box. This is the final book in the Cruel Prince series. The Cruel Prince is about Jude Duarte. She is a girl who was taken at the age of 7 into Fairy by the man who murdered her parents, and she's grown up in Fairy and had to deal with the fact that as a human, she is not thought of very well. And even though she has been raised as this kidnapper's daughter, she still gets kind of bullied by the fairies, primarily by Cardan, who, the Cruel Prince. This series chronicles her journey, dealing with the fact that she witnessed her parents' murder, dealing with the fact that the Fae just kind of don't like her and think that she should not be one of the fairy gentry, even though her dad is. I gave this book 5 out of 5 stars. I am trash for this series. I'm sorry. If you have a problem with that, you're on the wrong channel. I just like books that have weird romance twists, apparently. This was everything I wanted it to be. There's only one thing that it didn't really have, and that was a ton of Jude and Cardan. If this book had been all Jude and Cardan and no plot, I would have been happy. However, there is a plot, but the plot made me happy. So I loved how this series wrapped up. I thought she did a great job. I know people talk about the fact that it's shorter and maybe some things feel rushed, but like we've had so much world building in The Cruel Prince and The Wicked King. I didn't feel like we needed to rehash any of that. There's a lot of expansion on stuff that we do already know. We see more about like different things that we have heard of before, but maybe not gotten full details on. Questions are answered, and good things happen. Bad things happen too. Lots of bad things. But good things also happen. I'm so happy that this ended so well for me because it could have ended very badly. And I was slightly nervous going into it. But I loved it. It was so good. It was everything I wanted, and then a whole bunch more. And so now, we are at the end of my wrap-up. Thank you so much for watching. If you enjoyed this video, go ahead and hit that thumbs up. It tells me that I need to make more videos like this. Also, if you are new here and you like videos about books and writing, go ahead and hit that subscribe button. That is it for now, my friends. Happy reading, and I will see you later when we will talk about more wordy, nerdy things. Bye!